Greetings, brethren. I hope I find you well wherever you are watching VSF TV, the channel which preaches about the last message that comes to join the third angel's message, the channel that is preaching the loud cry. May God be with you as you watch this and understand, and may He give you strength also to spread the word to other people so that when the kingdom is set, we will all march into the kingdom. So without wasting our time, today we're going to learn about the two laws in the Ark of the Covenant. The two laws in the Ark of the Covenant. These two laws that were put by God in the Ark of the Covenant, we want to see if they are still binding. We want to study and see whether when Christ came and died on the cross, He nailed the laws to the cross. We want to learn and see how they are going to, how they help us today as we worship our God, how important they are to us today. So these two laws in the covenant, we have the ceremonial law and the moral law. You will realize that most churches are teaching today that both the ceremonial law and the moral law were nailed to the cross by Christ. But does that mean that we should steal? Does that mean that we should not keep the Sabbath? Does that mean that we should kill? They say no. But what exactly is the devil nailing to the cross? It is mostly the law, the fourth law in the Ten Commandments, which says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. That is why He instituted the Sunday instead of the 7-day Sabbath. Then there are some churches who teach that the moral law is still binding, but when it comes to the ceremonial law, they say it was nailed to the cross. But you will realize as we will study today that there are so many things that they are doing, these churches, that is written in the ceremonial law, but still they are claiming that the ceremonial law was nailed to the cross. That is what we're going to study today, the two laws in the covenant, the ceremonial law and the moral law. The importance of the moral law, you will realize that the moral law, it is a memorial of creation, especially the fourth commandment, which says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, because God created for 6 days and rested on the seventh day. I'm going to read this quotation which talks about the moral law being the memorial of creation. That's PP, Patriarchs and Prophets, page 307.2. PP, page 307.2. It says, the Sabbath is not introduced as a new institution, but is having been founded at creation. It is not a new thing, this issue of the Sabbath, but it was actually founded at creation. It is to be remembered and observed as the memorial of the Creator's work. Can you see the importance of this moral law, the fourth commandment? It is to be remembered as and observed as the memorial of the Creator's work. So as we keep the Sabbath, we'll be acknowledging that God is the creator of heaven and earth. But as we reject keeping the Sabbath, we are saying it is not God who created the earth. So there is need for you, brethren, for everyone to observe the Sabbath, because we'll be saying God is the one who created the man, who created heaven and earth, who created everything that is on earth. I'll continue. Pointing to God as the maker of heavens and the earth. So the Sabbath points to God as the maker of heavens and earth. It distinguishes the true God from all the false gods. This is the importance of keeping the moral law. It distinguishes the true God from all the false gods. All the false gods have no power to create except the true God of the Sabbath. All who keep the 7th day signify by this act that they are worshippers of Jehovah. So if you are a worshipper of Jehovah, then you should keep the Sabbath. It's clear. Thus, the Sabbath is the sign of man's allegiance to God as long as they are any upon the earth to save him. The fourth commandment is the only one of all the 10, which are found both the name and the title of the lawgiver. So, can you see the importance of the moral law? It is the only one that shows by whose authority the law is given. It tells us by whose authority the law is given. So the moral law is still binding, including the other laws which tell us to honor thy father and thy mother so that thy days may be prolonged. There's 10 of them, they are still binding. If we don't keep them, then there's no way we can truly worship our God. It says again here, thus it contains the seal of God fixed to his law as evidence of its authenticity and binding force. So there's another point here which says the moral law contains also the seal of God. So we are sealed by keeping the 10 commandments. We get the seal of God, especially the Sabbath. Especially the Sabbath. So I'm going to continue here. The moral law. So point number 1 is that the moral law is the memorial of creation. Then it is also a seal. It gives us the seal of God. By keeping the Sabbath or the Sabbath, we get the seal of God. Ezekiel chapter 20 verse 12 says here, moreover, also I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them. So if you want to get the seal of God, then you should keep the laws of God. You should keep God's Sabbaths so that you get the seal of God. It is the devil who changed these things because he knows that by not obeying the 10 commandments, you will not get the seal of God, but you rather get the mark of the beast or the seal of the beast. The other important thing about the law is that the moral law is that it points to sin. It tells us what sin is. It gives us the definition of what sin is, right? Romans chapter 3 verse 20 says here, therefore by the deeds of the law they shall no flesh be justified in his sight. For by the law is the knowledge of sin. It is by the law that we can be able to understand what sin is. It tells us what sin is, but it cannot give us the remedy. Then that's where the ceremonial law comes in as the remedy of sin. The moral law only points to us what sin is, but it does not give us the remedy on what to do next after sinning. So that was all about the moral law. We now go to the ceremonial law. The ceremonial law, which comprises of a lot of things, the tithes and offerings, we have the ordinance of feet washing, we have the feasts, of the Lord, or the statutes of the Lord, the Feast of Tabernacles, Passover, Pentecost, all those things are under the ceremonial law. We also have the killing of animals that was being done in the Old Testament for the remission of sin. So this ceremonial law was added after transgression. It was added after transgression as the remedy for sin. Then it is also a sign of redemption. Can you see how important it is? In the Old Testament, they were killing the animals in order to be forgiven their sins. But when Christ died on the cross, he substituted the lamb with the bread and the wine. And that is still binding. We still need that because we sin every day and we need that remedy, which is the ceremonial law. So the ceremonial law is still important in our lives. PK, page 678.2. Prophets and Kings 678.2. It says, in the time of the end, every divine institution is to be restored. Everything that was taken away by the devil during the time of the Dark Ages is going to be restored. That is both the moral law and the ceremonial law. The breach made in the law at the time the Sabbath was changed by men is to be repaired. So this is the time to repair the breach. It is not the time to nail the things that Christ did not even nail to the cross. God's covenant, God's remnant people standing before the world as reformers are to show that the law of God is the foundation of all enduring reform, and that the Sabbath of the fourth commandment is to stand as a memorial of creation, a constant reminder of the power of God. So, this is the time of the repairing of the breach. This is the time of putting back the laws of God. In clear, distinct lines, they are to present the necessity of obedience to all precepts of the Decalogue. The constrained by the love of Christ, they are to cooperate with Him in building the west places. So this is the time to cooperate with God in building the west places, putting back the laws of God which were removed by the devil. They are to be repairers of the breach, restorers of the paths to dwell in. This is the time, brethren, to put back both the laws on the right place. So, the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament had both the two laws, but it was hidden, and right now no one knows where it is. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 26 says, "Take this book of the law and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against you." That's the time when the law was put into the ark of the covenant. But this covenant was hidden, and the spirit of prophecy tells us that the covenant will be brought forth at judgment. So these laws are still very important, because during the time of the judgment, these laws will be brought back. This is the time of the judgment. The judgment for the dead started in 1844, and now is the time for the judgment of the living. These messages that we are receiving from God are actually binding people. The harvest is already started. Some are already rejecting the messages and some are accepting. That is the harvest. It has already begun. And the SOP is telling us that the covenant will be brought forth in the time of the judgment. I'm going to read PK page 535.2. Prophets and Kings 453.2. It says, "Among the righteous still," this is the time when the Ark of the Covenant was hidden during the time of the Old Testament. "Among the righteous still in Jerusalem, to whom had been made plain, among the righteous still in Jerusalem, to whom had been made plain the divine purpose, were some who determined to place beyond the reach of ruthless hands the sacred ark containing the tables of stone on which had been traced the precepts of the Decalogue." There were people who were righteous during the time when almost everyone was doing bad things. These are the people who tried to put the Ark of the Covenant in a place where no one was going to reach it. This they did with mourning and sadness. They did this with mourning and sadness. They secreted the ark in a cave. They put it in a cave where it was to be hidden from the people of Israel and Judah because of their sins. Because of the sins of Israel, they had to put it somewhere where no one could see it. And they did this with tears. They did this with sadness. This was the time when almost everyone in Israel was doing bad things. But today, what are the kind of things that make you cry? Things that have nothing to do with eternal life. But these were men of God, because they cried, because people were not keeping the laws of God. It says here, "That sacred ark is yet hidden. It has never been disturbed since it was secreted." So even up to today, it is still hidden. It is still hidden. But we're going to read another quotation here. It says, "These laws that were inside the Ark of the Covenant are going to be kept again in the time of judgment." So long. This is PK again, PK page 186.2. PK 186.2. It says, so long have men worshipped human opinions and human institutions that almost the whole world is following after idols. It has been long, and men are worshipping the opinions, the human opinions and human institutions. People are no longer following God. They listen to men more than they listen to the word of God, more than they listen to God. This is the time we are living today. Blessed are they that listen to what God says, or that listen to the people that are sent by God, or to God's prophets. And he who has endeavored to change God's law is using every deceptive artifice to induce men and women to array themselves against God and against the sign by which the righteous are known. This is the work of the devil. This is what he's doing. But the Lord will not always suffer his law to be broken and despised with impunity. He will not sit back and watch while his people are destroying his laws, while his people are nailing his laws to the cross. He will do something. There will always be a people who will stand up for God, who will preach everything that is written in the Bible. Okay, I'll continue here. It says, there's a time coming, there's a time that is coming when the lofty looks of men shall be humbled, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. So in the last days, God alone is going to be exalted. Skepticism may treat the claims of God's law with jest and scoffing and denial. This is what is happening. The spirit of worldliness may contaminate the many and control a few. The cause of God may hold its ground only by great exception and continual sacrifice. Yet in the end, the truth will triumph gloriously. So in the end, the truth will triumph. They might try to nail the laws of God today, both the ceremonial and the moral law, but in the end, the laws of God will triumph gloriously. That is the assurance that we're being given here by the spirit of prophets. Blessed are they that read, because they can never be deceived. Those who do not read are the ones who will be deceived in the last days. But if you read, you will know exactly what God is planning to do with his word, with his people. I'll continue reading. There's another quotation here that talks about these two laws of God. We have PK, Prophets and Kings 186, still on PK point 3. It says here, in the closing work of God in the earth, the standard of his law will be again exalted. So the devil is not going to triumph, but it says here the law will again be exalted. This is the time of the of which the law of God is being exalted. False religion may prevail. False religion may seem to prevail. Iniquity may abound. The love of many may wax cold. This is what is happening today. Many, it says, the love of many may wax cold. The cross of Calvary may be lost sight of, and darkness like the pall of death may spread over the world. This is exactly what is happening today. This is the situation we are in today, whereby many have lost their first life. The whole force of the popular current may be turned against the truth. Plot after plot may be formed to overthrow the people of God. Plot after plot is being formed today to overthrow the people of God. But in the hour of greatest peril, the God of Elijah will raise up human instrumentalities to bear a message that will not be silenced. So God will have his own instrumentalities who will bear the message, the last message of Elijah. And these people, the spirit of prophecy is telling us that they cannot be silenced. Pray, brethren, so that you become part of these instrumentalities that are being referred to here. We are going to stand up for the laws of God so that they will not be trodden down. In the popular cities of the land and in the places where men have gone to the greatest lengths in speaking against the Most High, the voice of stern rebuke will be heard from those who love God. Okay? Boldly, with men of God appointed, denounce the union of the church with the world. There are some people who are going to denounce the union of the church with the world. We're in the time where the churches are joining with the world. It is very difficult to demarcate to see whether the people are worshiping God or not. Because people are mixing ideas, taking ideas from the world and putting them into the church. They have stopped using the Bible. They have stopped using the spirit of prophecy. And that's why they have become one with the world. The laws that they are practicing in churches, they are taking them from the world. And God is watching, but He's saying He is going to have His people who stand up for the truth, who spread the truth, and they cannot be silenced by anyone. It says here, I'll continue. Earnestly will they call upon men and women to turn from the observance of man-made institution to the observance of the true Sabbath. Fear God and give glory to Him. They will proclaim to every nation. So God is going to have a people who are going to preach these laws in the last days, who are going to proclaim them and explain them to the people that they are still binding. May it be you who is going to preach these laws and not to teach people that they were nailed to the cross. PK 187.1 was still on the importance of the law of God. Was still talking about the two laws in the covenant, the ceremonial law and the moral law. God will not break His covenant. This is important. Listen carefully. God will not break His covenant. What He says He cannot change. You remember Matthew, that's why Christ said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, I have not come to abolish the law, but actually to fulfill it. So who are we to say that it was nailed to the cross when Christ said that He came to fulfill the law and not to nail it to the cross? PK 187.1, God will not break His covenant, nor alter the thing that has gone out of His lips. His word will stand fast forever, as unalterable as His throne. So nothing is going to change. Those laws that were put in the Ark of the Covenant are the laws that were still that we should keep today. He's not going to alter anything. He's not going to speak anything against what He said before. It is the devil who is deceiving people. At the judgment, at the judgment, this covenant will be brought forth plainly written with the finger of God. So in the time of the judgment, the time that we're in, the covenant will be brought back again. It is going to be taught again to His people. And the world will be arraigned before the bar of infinite justice to receive sentence. So that same law that the world is nailing to the cross, God is saying here, He's going to use it at the time of the judgment, at the time of the end, at the time of the 10 toes, which is the time that we're living today. So there's no way we can say that God Christ nailed the law to the cross. For God is going to use it again in the time of judgment. I'm going to read again on PK 187.2. Today is in the days of Elijah. The line is in the days of Elijah. So what is happening today is actually the same as what was happening at the time of Elijah. It says the line of demarcation between God's commandment-keeping people and the worshippers of false gods is clearly drawn. So people that love the law of God are worshiping together. And those who do not love God, well, do not want to keep the laws of God, are worshiping also together. It says here there's a clear line of demarcation between those who worship God and those who do not. because they are still keeping the commandments. They are still keeping the feast of the Lord. And those who do not do that, it's clearly seen again that they are not keeping the Sabbath. They are not keeping the laws of God. So the line is said to be clear today. How long halt ye between two opinions? Elijah cried, if the Lord be God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the message for today is, listen to the message for today. It says, Babylon the Great is fallen. Come out of here, my people, that he may not partakers of her sins, and that he receive not her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. So, this is the message of today, brethren, that people should come out of Babylon, come out of confusion, come out of churches that do not want to keep the laws of God, so that there will be a clear line of demarcation between those who worship God and those who do not. So, God at this time is grouping his people, the people who love him together, so that they worship together and do the same thing. And those who do not want, it will be clearly seen that those do not love the laws of God. So the moral law, that is, the moral law, as I've said before, it tells us what sin is. I'm going to read again. First John chapter 3, verse 4. We're still on the laws. First John chapter 3, verse 4. It says, whosoever commits sin transgresses also the law. For sin is the transgression of the law. Sin is the transgression of the law. So the moral law is still important to us today because it defines to us what it gives us the definition of transgressing the law, the definition of sin. It is like a mirror that shows us that shows us where we have met, that tells us we have done something wrong, that tells us we have sinned. Then we will need the remedy, which is the ceremonial law. I'm going to read again this other quotation. The other importance of the moral law is that it gives us the seal of the Lord. I've said this before. It gives us the seal of God. And the opposite of the seal of God, what is it? It is the mark of the beast. So those who reject to keep the laws of God and keeping human laws or human enactments actually receive the mark of the beast. So the laws of God are important today because they help us they help us not to receive the mark of the beast. If you receive them and act upon them, then you get the seal of God. If you reject, then you get the mark of the beast. The opposite of seal of God, of the seal of God, is the mark of the beast. Great Controversy 466.3 tells us that it says, while the worshippers of God will be especially distinguished by their regard for the fourth commandment, which is the seventh day Sabbath, since this is the sign of his creative power and the witness of his claim upon man's reverence and homage. The worshippers of the beast will be distinguished by their efforts to tear down the Creator's memorial to exalt the institution of Rome. So, as we exalt the laws of the devil, we'll be running away from receiving the seal of God, and we'll definitely receive the mark of the beast. So, that's all about the ceremonial law. It points to sin. It is a memorial. It is a memorial of creation. It tells us that God is the true God. It distinguishes God from the uh, false gods. Because of the if we keep the fourth commandment, we are telling the world that we believe that God is the creator of the whole universe. So that was all about the moral law. It is very crucial for us. It points to sin. It tells us that we have sinned. So we'll now go on to the ceremonial law, which was also in the Ark of the Covenant. The ceremonial law, part of it was nailed to the cross. Not all the laws of the ceremonial law was nailed to the cross, but part was nailed to the cross. If we read the book of Colossians, chapter 4, chapter 2, verse 14, it tells us what exactly was nailed to the cross. It says, blotting out the handwriting of the ordinances that was against us. So that which Christ blotted on the cross was against us. Anything that was not against us was not nailed to the cross. That which was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. So that which was against us is that which was nailed to the cross. What is it, brethren? You find that after men sinned, the law of killing of animals was introduced. The ceremonial law of killing animals was introduced. And how was that law against us? It tells us men were told to kill the animals for the remission of sins. But if you go to the Ten Commandments, you find that it says, thou shalt not kill. So after being forgiven their sins, they will feel that there's something missing because they have killed. They have broken one of the 10 commandments. So that is the law that was nailed to the cross. The killing of animals, the killing of lambs day by day for the remission of sins. And Christ, it was substituted with the bread and the wine by Christ himself. Hebrews 9 verse 9 also explains about this law that was contrary to us, the law of the killing of animals. It says, this was a figure, which was a figure of the time then present, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices, that would not make him that did the service perfect as pertaining to the conscience. So after offering all these offerings, they were left the, the killing, the sacrifices did not make them perfect as pertaining to the conscience, because one has broken one of the 10 commandments. That was the law that was nailed to the cross. So why then are we saying the ceremonial law is still crucial today? It is because it talks about a in the ceremonial law in the Old Testament, there was a high priest. And in the New Testament, after the cross, we also talk about the high priest. In the book of Revelation, we are told that because Christ died, we all have been made priests and kings. So this priesthood issue, which was also in the Old Testament, it was not nailed to the cross, because we've been made priests and kings because of the death of Christ. I'm going to read here from the tract, The Covenant. It says, the ceremonial law still remains intact in the ark, in the side of the ark, in the Holy of Holies. And there our high priest offers his own blood, the blood of the Lamb of God for us. So Christ, he has become the high priest, and he is in the holy, after dying on the cross, he is in the Holy of Holies, listening to our prayers that we offer day by day. So the issue of the high priest, which was in the Old Testament, is still there in the New Testament, and Christ is our high priest. So the ceremonial law is still binding. I'm going to read again from the tract, The Covenant. It says here, when Messiah dedicated the apostles to the priesthood, he washed their feet. Here we see the ordinance of feet washing. The ordinance of feet washing, which was done by Christ in the New Testament. And he told the disciples that they should continue to do it, because it has a deeper meaning. It means, it refers to a cleansing that is of higher order. I'm going to read again here. Jesus was fulfilling the ceremonial law, but he didn't do away with it by nailing it to the cross. It says here in John chapter 13, verse 14, if I then, your Lord and Master, washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. So he told his disciples that they should continue washing one another's feet. Here we see type fulfilled in antitype, and the ceremonial law was not abolished but fulfilled. The ceremonial law was actually fulfilled. Today, the entire church is to be consecrated as high priest by fulfilling the rite of foot, of foot washing, the symbol of cleansing. Foot washing is a symbol of cleansing, and many churches are still doing it today. But they tell you that the ceremonial law was nailed to the cross when it was not, when they are still observing the ordinance of feet washing, which is part of the ceremonial law. That is confusion. That is what the Bible that's what the Bible uh, calls Babylon. That is confusion. And the message of today is saying, come out of here, my people. You say you don't keep the ceremonial law when you are doing feet washing. You don't keep the ceremonial law when you are collecting tithes and offerings. That is part of the ceremonial law. That is what we're going to be discussing today. We have the issue of the way of shift. The ceremonial law is still binding because foot washing is still being done today. And Christ told his disciples to continue doing it. Because also the issue of the way of shift. I'm going to read here from the same tract, the covenant. It says here, Jesus fulfilled the ceremonial law. Jesus himself fulfilled the ceremonial law when he was offered as the way of shift on the cross on earth on the second day of the Passover. Christ fulfilled the worship, the ceremonial law. So it is still binding because of that. Here it says again, after his resurrection on Sunday morning, he continued to fulfill the ceremonial law, Christ himself, when he offered the wave sheaf in the courts above. Deserve, that is, if you read Desire of Ages, page 785 to 786, you see this story. So Christ fulfilled the ceremonial law when he offered the wave sheaf in the courts above after his resurrection. So who are we to say that the ceremonial law was nailed to the cross by Christ when he actually fulfilled it well after the cross? That is confusion. That is what the Bible calls Babylon. Confusion, mixing up things. We need to read the Bible clearly and the spirit of prophecy so that we understand what exactly was nailed to the cross. I'll continue reading from the tract, The Covenant here. It says, if the ceremonial law was abolished on the cross, how was it? This is a question. How was it that Jesus offered the way of shift in heaven 2 days after the cross? This clearly indicates that the ceremonial law is still binding. Only the issue of the killing of animals is the one that Christ took away, that Christ nailed to the cross. So we now go on to the issue of the tithes and offerings. Many churches, as I've said earlier, are teaching that the ceremonial law was nailed to the cross. But ask them, why then are you collecting tithes and offerings? Because this law was given in the Old Testament. If you read Malachi chapter 3, verse 8 to 10, it talks about the tithes and offerings, where it says, will a man rob God? It talks about the tithes and offering. That was in the Old Testament. And you'd find that in the New Testament also, Paul wrote about these tithes and offerings, meaning this law of this part of law of the ceremonial law of tithes and offerings was not nailed to the cross. It says here, Corinthians chapter 9, verse 14, it reads, even so as the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. Those are the tithes and offerings that support the ministry. So the law of the tithes and offerings is still binding. It's part of the ceremonial law, but we are supposed to keep it. People are supposed to bring back tithes and offerings to God, even up to today. So when you say Christ nailed the whole law to the cross, which law exactly are you talking about? Which law exactly? I'm going to read again here. It says, track this from the tract again, the covenant of God. It says, this part of the ceremonial law was not nailed to the cross. Which part here are we talking about? The part of tithes and offerings. It says, this part of the ceremonial law was not nailed to the cross. Of a surety, Jesus would not be so thoughtless as to permit the devil to nail his means of support of the gospel ministry to the cross. How would Christ nail it to the cross when he wants the gospel to be spread using those same manners? He won't do that. He won't do that. Then, besides the issue of the tithes and offerings, we have just discussed the tithes and offerings to prove that the ceremonial law is still binding. We also have the unclean things and meats, unclean meats. If we say that the ceremonial law was nailed to the cross, what does that mean? Then it means that we can eat anything that crawls on the earth. It means we can eat any bird that flies in the air. It means that you can eat anything that is in the ocean, in the waters. We can eat anything. Does we cannot teach that. We cannot accept that. Does that mean that even snakes can be eaten? No. This law of unclean things, of unclean meats was written in the Old Testament and it is still binding. People say, no, 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 we can't eat everything. Which law? In which law are you taking that? It's obviously from the ceremonial law, meaning it is still binding. God still wants his people to eat that which he called food in the Old Testament. That which he called food in the Old Testament. If you read in Genesis, you find that men were given every herb bearing seed, every it's vegetarian diet is the diet that God it is the diet that God wants his people today to follow, not eating everything that grows on the earth. So the law of the clean meats, the clean foods, it's still binding. If you read even the book of Sister White in Counsels on Diet, it tells us that flesh must not be taken. Flesh is not supposed to be eaten today. People are supposed to go back to the original diet of fruits and vegetables, of fruits, grains, and vegetables. This law is still binding. That is why you find that many are diseased. It's because they are running away from the original diet. The one who makes a car is the one who knows what is supposed to be put into the car, whether it's going to be petrol or diesel. Same applies when it comes to these issues of worshiping God. He's the one who created us and knows what is supposed to be the best food for this system that he created. He knows best and not us, the ones who were created. The creator knows best. So that diet that he gave to men, it is still binding. You still need to eat the right food today, or else we'll be diseased. We'll get so many diseases from the flesh that many people are consuming today. So the law of the ceremonial law is still binding when it comes to the type of food that people are supposed to eat today. So now we're going to the last point in proving that the ceremonial law is still binding. There are so many things that can prove that the ceremonial law is still binding, but I have just chosen a few. The last one that we're going to look at is that the ceremonial law points to future deliverance. The ceremonial law points to future deliverance. So it means we're supposed to keep these feasts. The feast of the statutes are also part of the ceremonial law, and the feasts are said to be harvest. They are harvest feasts. whereby God is going to harvest his people at the time when we are going to keep this feast, and therefore they should be kept according to the times that are pointed out in the symbolic service. So I'm going to read here Patriarchs and Prophets, page 277.1. 277.1. It says, the Passover was to be both commemorative and typical, not only pointing back to the deliverance from Egypt, but forward to the greater deliverance which Christ was to accomplish in freeing his people from the bondage of sin. So the Passover was not only pointing back to the deliverance that was done in Egypt when they were coming from Egypt to Canaan, but also pointed to the deliverance by Christ on the cross after dying for the people. The sacrificial lamb represents the Lamb of God, in whom is our only hope of salvation, says the apostle. Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. So the Passover was also typical, pointing to Christ to the deliverance on the cross by Christ when he died on the cross. Then we have the Feast of Tabernacles. It's also the Feast of Tabernacles. It points to the future deliverance of God's people. So there's need for us to continue keeping it at the times that God gave us in the symbolic service in the Old Testament, in the book of Leviticus. I'm going to read from PP page 541.2. 541.2. It says, the Feast of Tabernacles was not only commemorative, but typical. It not only pointed back to the wilderness sojourn, but as the feast of harvest. Can you see what I've said earlier? That these feasts are harvest feasts, where God's children are going to be harvested during the times when these feasts are kept, and at the place where God says they should be kept. It celebrated the ingathering of the fruits of the earth and pointed forward to the great day of final gathering. It's pointing to final, to the future deliverance of God's people. Final gathering, when the Lord of the harvest shall send forth his reapers to gather the tares together in bundles for the fire, and to gather the wheat into the garner. At that time, the wicked will all be destroyed. They will become as though they had not been. Can you see what will happen to the wicked ones? They will become as though they had not been. So it's important to choose the side of the Lord so that you live eternally and not be as this. As though they had not been. Okay. Obadiah 16. And every voice in the whole universe will unite in joyful praise to God, says the Revelator. Every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth, and such as are in the sea, and all that are in them. I saying, blessing and honor and glory. There are some people who are going to say these words in future because they are obeying God's commandments today, because they are not nailing the laws of God today. They will say, blessing and honor and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb forever and ever. This is the time, brethren, to pray for our souls so that when the time comes, we'll be able to say these words with those that are going to be saved. So, for today, brethren, this is all I had for you, and I hope that God will help you to grasp these things, to understand them, to act upon them, so that we'll be part of the family in heaven when Christ gathers his people. May God be with us so that everywhere we go, we understand that God has two laws, the ceremonial law, the moral law, and all the two laws are still binding. That which was nailed to the cross is the ordinance of the killing of animals, but all the other things are still binding. This is the time to come out of confusion. This is the time to come out of Babylon, because it says, the spirit of prophecy says, in the last years there's going to be a clear line of demarcation between those who love God and those who do not love God, between those who keep his commandments and those who do not. May God bless you, brethren, so that you keep on keeping these laws until the time comes when we are all going to be harvested. May God bless the reading of his word.